We're going to look at a rare collection of ancient North American maps from the mid-1500s to the early 1800s, which reveal a chilling story of at least two massive cataclysmic earth changes. One major event in the mid-1600s turned California into an island and later back into a peninsula. It also split a single giant lake in Canada into what is now Lake Manitoba and Lake Winnipeg. This split appears to have caused the formation of the Great Lakes of the Midwest and thousands of smaller lakes just to their north. The second cataclysmic event of the early 1800s seems to have crumbled the mountains containing a massive ancient 3,300 square mile inland lake or sea, which was called Comets, creating the Grand Canyon, the Great Salt Lake, and all of the destruction we see in the southwestern United States. Not millions of years ago, as we are told by lamestream science. Perhaps by coincidence or not, this massive sea was only about 100 miles south of what is now Yellowstone National Park. We are also told by lamestream science that it has been 630,000 years since the last Yellowstone eruption. Strangely, the trees in Yellowstone look to be very young, only a couple of hundred years old at best, but that's another story. Or is it? Let's take a look at the United States today, at least according to Google Earth. Have you ever noticed that the lush green United States looks like a 6,000 kiloton bomb went off right around Yellowstone and blew away everything to the south and west of it? Unless old man America just suddenly went bald there from aging, something just doesn't add up. By no coincidence, this is right where the Lake Connibus was located on maps up until the early 1800s and never seen again after. This lake or sea, Connibus, was 130 miles long by 111 miles wide. You can still see the heart-shaped imprint of it on Google Maps today, which matches the same shape the ancient cartographers used on their maps. You'll also notice that both the Grand Canyon and the Glen Canyon start clearly at the perimeter of this ancient dried-up lake bed. Another coincidence? Researchers of the mud floods and Tartarian destruction might recognize where this is going. But Sherman, let's set the Wayback Machine to 1544 and see what the early explorers and cartographers had to say. They were the Google Earth of their time, after all. On these maps before 1650, notice California as part of the mainland, Lake Connibus to its northeast, and the remarkable absence of the 5 Great Lakes in the Midwest. We can see that cartographers from the 15 and 1600s already possessed very detailed knowledge of the towns and peoples in these lands, yet failed to map or mention the biggest lakes in the world? Then when did they appear? Where did they come from? And what massive event created them? Suddenly, sometime around the mid-1600s, the Great Lakes appear out of nowhere, and California is now an island that ships can sail completely around. How did that happen? From 1650 up until around 1810, the Great Lakes are consistently shown, but we can see that some of the maps show California as an island while others still show it as a peninsula. At this point, we must emphasize that plagiarism was the norm in cartography, so we have no way of knowing what and how much are copied from earlier maps. These are obviously not the only maps in existence for that time period. Other maps may come up showing there were Great Lakes indeed mapped at that time, in which case the Great Lakes theory would be out the window. It is just that, a theory. But one thing that really stands out is that Connibus was clearly there right up until around 1810, as was California, an island. On the maps from 1810 and onwards, Lake Connibus is nowhere to be found. The Great Salt Lake appears west of where Connibus used to be. California is no longer an island, and maps are lacking any detail of the whole area. Something drastically changed the topography of the land. But what? In part 2, we'll examine the comet records and also the slew of bizarre electrical atmospheric phenomenon, earthquakes, volcanoes, plagues, and other strange events happening worldwide at exactly these same time periods. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. In part 1, we looked at a chronological series of ancient maps that suggest at least two major geological upheavals and topography changes to the United States. The first sometime in the early to mid 1600s, and the second in the first decade of the 1800s. I know, we would have been told about this. Our kids feel the same way about Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy. Objective and subjective reality can often be two different universes. Anyway, we touched on the possibility that a Yellowstone eruption may have taken place around the early 1800s, along with the crumbling part of a mountain range 100 miles south of it, which freed and spilled a colossal ancient lake known as Conibus, creating the Great Salt Lake, the Grand Canyon, and all of the geological destruction of the Southwest. We are left with the glaring question, if these events occurred, how and why? It might seem that the comet records of those centuries is an odd place to look for such clues, but as it so happens, they reveal incredible evidence of almost supernatural electromagnetic atmospheric phenomenon, comet appearances, meteors, plagues, disease, supervolcanic eruptions, and major earthquakes of almost biblical proportions happening worldwide in exactly those two time periods. Our first question is, do comets, plasma discharges, and electromagnetic atmospheric anomalies have any correlation with superquakes and volcanic eruptions?
Why, yes they do, Bob. Thanks for asking.
But rather than do our nuts in with the pontificating mumbo-jumbo lingo of the National Academy of Sciences and the AGU 100 advanced Earth and space scientists, we'll leave links for those of you nerdy types interested in the details. To sum up in semi-understandable language for the rest of us, basically studies were done in the Izu Island region of Japan, which confirmed the existence of SEMS, or seismo-electromagnetic effects, which is a sciencey term for physical, electric, and magnetic field disruptions, which happen a month before major magnitude 6.0 earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, which build in intensity and culminate to a peak just hours before these quakes and eruptions. There seems to be a which came first, the chicken or the egg debate in the scientific community. Are the earth changes below causing the magnetic and electrical field changes above before these events, or the other way around, or both? Whichever it is, the correlation definitely exists. Could comets and electromagnetic atmospheric phenomenon from above affect seismic activity below? Before we blow our minds with the year 1816, known as 1800 and frozen to death, the infamous Napoleon's comet of that time, and the New Madrid quakes of 1811 that decimated 5 Midwestern states, let's go back to the late 1500s through mid-1600s and have a look at the freakish phenomenon going on at that time, not just in America, but all around the world. 1582, comet, earthquake near Lima, a tempest or violent windy storm in May. 1583, earthquake in England. Not London, the whole of England. The plague sets in. 1586, comet again. Earthquake in Lima again. Plague in Turkey, locusts and plague. 1590, comet. An earthquake shook Europe and also the Azores. Europe? All of Europe? What kind of event shakes all of Europe? There was a plague in Finland and pestilence. 1593, comet, earthquake in Persia, severe winter in 1594. Pay attention to these severe winters in relation to these patterns. Their relevance will become apparent soon enough. 1597, comet, pestilence and great plague in England. Cannons were fired and aromatics burnt to shake and purify the air. 1599, comet, plague in Italy, Portugal, and Spain. 1600, comet, earthquake in Italy, pestilence everywhere that scourged Europe for some years. 1607, comet, great atmospheric commotions, here we go, swell of the ocean and rivers, sea levels rising, floods, Great Lakes, anyone? A winter of uncommon severity followed all over the world. The whole world? Was this Halley's Comet? 1609, comet, another earthquake at Lima, eruption of Mount Etna, plague, sailors seized with calenture, which is a delirium normally suffered in the tropics. Electromagnetic interference of brain function, perhaps? 30 dead bodies in one day thrown overboard in Sir Thomas Gates' fleet bound to Virginia. Dead from what? Delirium? Neptune, the god of the sea, and Jove, which is Jupiter, the god of thunder in the sky, were on bad terms all year. This means fighting or catastrophic weather. So rough were the waters that it was many years before sleek Panope, who is a female spirit of the seawater that accompanies Poseidon, would gamble on the level brine again, meaning there were no calm sea waters for many years. 1612, comets. Storms at sea laid 2,000 dead carcasses on the English coast, 1,200 on the Dutch shore. A plague in Constantinople destroyed 200,000 people. In summer, Europe was covered by grasshoppers. It is a known fact that electromagnetic waves affect grasshoppers and locust swarms. EME complexes are fitted to vehicles and unmanned aerial vehicles today just to combat flying locusts in transit. So what drove them all into Europe? 1614, comet, suspected eruption of Mount Etna. 1618, two comets, earthquake in Rhetia, Switzerland, hurricane in Bermuda. 1620, comet, followed by cold winter, violent storm and tides. 1625, comet, eruptions of Hekla in Iceland and Palma in Spain. 1632, Mount Vesuvius lost 200 feet of altitude by burning, earthquake of Naples. 1633, comet again, another severe winter afterwards. Etna is volcanic for 5 years and an earthquake in London. 1635, comet, another eruption of both Vesuvius and Etna and earthquakes. In America, a memorable tempest. Now, how windy and violent does a storm have to get to be memorable 200 years later? 1638, earthquake in Calabria destroyed 30,000 lives. Also extensive earthquakes in America in June. America? Not Delaware, but known America? Tremendous storms of wind in autumn. In 1639, swarms of small flies on the sea near the coast. Like all insects, flies are affected by electromagnetic fields. 1640, a remarkable meteor in America at great elevation early in the morning. Very curious meteors seen at Boston the following years. Curious, as in not expected? 1647, comet, earthquake in America. America? Where, all of settled America? Plague in London, and in America influenza was general and very fatal. 1652, another comet, earthquake in South America, another eruption of Mount Vesuvius. 1658, earthquake in America. 1661, comet and earthquake the next year in America, followed by the Great Plague of 1665. Aside from putting the modern-day man-made climate change hysteria into a different perspective, I don't know about you, but I find it strange that comets, earthquakes, volcanoes, plagues, strange brain diseases, raging floodwaters and seas, and electromagnetic-affected insect swarms seem to all get out of control around the same periods of time together. Coincidence? Perhaps. But what we should be asking is, with all of this electromagnetic and geological turmoil going on worldwide, is it possible or so far-fetched to suspect a combination of, or even one major cataclysmic event around this same time may be the reason the maps look so drastically different afterwards? Perhaps causing the formation of the Great Lakes and turning California into an island? Let's jump forward to where things get really crazy. We're talking Twilight Zone crazy.
Yes, you've just crossed over into the Twilight Zone.
1786. The early part of the year was cold. Aurora Borealis, April 29th. A flood, November 5th. This is not impossible, though it is very rare. The scientific explanation for Borealis is that charged solar particles interact with the Earth's magnetic fields and collide with gas particles that cause the characteristic glow. They tell us this happens at the magnetic poles constantly because the magnetic fields are stronger there. They are usually green due to collision with oxygen particles, but exciting different gases can produce different colors. What is interesting is that suddenly Borealis will start to be seen in England and the United States leading up to the 1812 event. So what was going on with the magnetic fields on the Earth at that time for this rare phenomenon to start being seen more often? 1787, comet Aurora Borealis on St. Paul's Day. 1788, 2 comets. The autumn was very tempestuous and hurricanes in the West Indies. On the 17th of October, a remarkable meteor in Connecticut. 1788, a singular halo in Connecticut, 28th of May. On the 27th, there had been fine auroras again. A remarkable black spot was seen on the sun the 9th of November, and there was famine in America. Earthquakes closed the year, and a remarkable cloud, light, and storm. 1790, 3 small comets. Earthquakes in Africa, and in 1791 an earthquake felt at Lisbon, and Aurora Borealis in October 1790. 1792, another comet, earthquake felt in Perthshire, and a comet again in 1793. 1794, right after this, the crops fail in England. 1795, Mount Vesuvius broke out in flames on the 15th of June, and in America, a species of headache with vertigo became epidemic. He says no bleeding, opiates, nor aperients, which are constipation drugs, had any effect on these headaches. Meteor, September 9th. Could this be an electromagnetic atmospheric disturbance causing this strange epidemic? 1797, 2 more comets. Hydrophobia epidemic in Rhode Island. Suddenly everyone is afraid of water? Do they have rabies? What on earth was going on to affect brain physiology? 1798, comet, a severe winter followed. There's that cold again. 1799, 2 comets, storm of wind and severe early winter. 1800, violent storm of wind, chimneys blown down at Hackney. Floods at Martin Moss. 1801, comet, much flooding in December, early snowfall and cold winter. Again, Aurora Borealis in September. 1803, comet and great meteor in November. 1804, comet, northern lights on St. Cecily's Day. 1805, 2 comets and a curious vortex, like a vapor on elm trees, which turned out to be insects. The bugs are going crazy again. 1806, and here is the curious bit. I shall now be more brief in my notes, as the journal from this period has been published already by me in my book on atmospheric phenomenon in 1823. So what kind of atmospheric phenomenon was going on in this period that deserved a detailed section and an entire book on the subject? But I digress. 1807, comet. 1809, comet, the cornfield strewn by tempests in September. 1810, comet. In autumn prevailed a bilious epidemic with hypochondriasis, which is chronic health anxiety. The whole summer had been unhealthy, and get this, the atmospheric electrometers had indicated a peculiar fluctuation of the electricity of the air. Oh, really? The clouds exhibited all the year the most whimsical and grotesque figures, and my aerostatic experiment showed various currents at once. Really, you don't say. 1811, comet with very brilliant tail, the largest seen for many years. See my journal for that month in atmospheric phenomenon. This comet was visible to accurate observers from May 1811 to July 1812. Electricity disturbed and clouds had very strange shapes. Pestilence in the south of Europe and Asia, and another comet recorded. We'll get right back to this comet shortly, dear viewer, for this, I believe, may be our culprit for 1812. But it is worthy to note that from this point on in his records, there are annual comets, diseases, and epidemics mentioned through 1834, but suddenly no more strange light phenomenon, no earthquakes, floods, tempests, or volcanic eruptions, with the exception of one earthquake in Scotland in 1817. As we mentioned earlier, there is a correlation between atmospheric electrical phenomenon in the ether and geological disturbances such as earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Could these comets be the cause of all of the aforementioned atmospheric electrical phenomenon in the ether in those time periods, triggering all of the auroras, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, brain disturbances, and even the plagues and epidemics of the time? In the Part 3 finale, we'll revisit 1811 through 1816, the appearance of Napoleon's comet, the wars and revolutions going on in every country on Earth at that time, the New Madrid quake that decimated 5 U.S. states, and the possibility of a major Yellowstone eruption that may have drained Lake Conobus and shifted enough landmass to join California back to the mainland. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.
Well, now, one thing, you have a theory about the moon, and we expect to be able to get observable facts about the moon fairly soon. What is your theory?
Well, it is by now rather more than a theory. 10 or 11 years ago, I stated to various scientists that the moon is not a piece of rock, but it is a plasma phenomenon, cosmic plasma, and that this fact will eventually be confirmed. I made certain predictions which were already confirmed in 1958, and the situation now is coming close to a complete confirmation.
What will be the result if you're proved to be correct in your theories?
The result will be profound and decisive, because it will give proof that a complete reinvestigation of the laws of nature is necessary. Because if the moon is a plasma, no man will ever land on it. The soft landing attempts will all fail. That means that the mass of the moon is far less than is currently assumed. It's in a different state of energy, and it has far less mass. That means there is no more explanation for the tides. If the moon, for example, had only a thousandth part of its current mass, then the tides would only be 2 inches high under conventional theories instead of sometimes 14 feet. And that means that if it is proved that the moon is a plasma, then all gravitational theories are out, and a new concept of the cosmos and of its laws has to be evolved.
Aren't you being a bit adventurous, though, because you know that we're going to be able to test out your theories on the moon fairly soon?
Well, not anymore. 11 years ago, of course, it was rather taking a risk. I was considered a lunatic, of course, but by now the evidence, accumulated evidence, is already so much in my favor that I'm not taking any risks anymore. On the contrary, there is scientific views expressed all over the world now that the moon seems to be of a quite different nature than what was assumed.
But the Americans and Russians are thinking of landing men on it.
Well, that will never happen. Not on the moon. On Mars, on Venus, on other planets, yes, but the moon is definitely, as I assert, a plasma.
If Professor Foster is right, could the moon be cold plasma or ice-coated plasma? Were the ancient sun worshippers? Or sun watchers? All cultures feared the sighting of comets for good reason. Comet sightings have often accompanied disasters, earthquakes, wars, famine, and plagues. Yet NASA claims that comets are just small, icy town-sized snowballs flying through outer space. It snows in space? From what clouds? We're taught most comets never pass by any closer than 15 million kilometers away. Temple Tuttle was the closest recorded, an alleged 3.5 million kilometers away. How can a 260 square kilometer snowball cause so much carnage from millions of kilometers away? It can't, unless comets are not space snowballs that cause chaos, but rather electromagnetic plasma phenomenon in the upper atmosphere that accompany it. A strange cosmology war is currently raging. One side claims we live here, spinning upside down and around while zooming trillions of kilometers per hour. The other side claims that we live on a flat, round plane at the center of a toroidal field, like this map. Suspended in infinite space or water. Both sides agree on one thing. The Earth's atmosphere has a propensity towards constant electromagnetic plasma buildup and discharge. Aurora borealis. Ball lightning. Red sprites. And all of these other plasma phenomenon. Are space snowballs a lie to hide the true nature of comets?
Leave me alone! We've traced the call. It's coming from inside the house. Our squad guard is going over there right now. Just get out of that house.
15 million kilometers away? Or electromagnetic plasma phenomenon coming from inside the house, our attic? The Mayan calendar. Cthulhu. Quetzalcoatl, the Demigorgon, the fog, the mist, Medusa the Gorgon, Kali the Destroyer, Shiva the Destroyer, Kronos the Destroyer, Thor. Modern and ancient mythologies are obsessed with world-destroying sky gods wielding fire, lightning, tentacles, and snakes. Religions are riddled with past and future apocalyptic stories and predictions. Native cultures are obsessed with fire rituals. Are these myths and traditions just metaphors for very real and terrifying cyclical events they experienced? Reminders for us to watch for signs and prepare? The Pope's sundial in St. Peter's Square. A bit overkill for a wristwatch, don't you think? Unless it's called a watch because we are watching for something specific. Maybe they just had to be at work by 9:30 in the morning in 1550 BC. Or maybe they were watching closely for the shortening of days. The Georgia Guidestone's post-deluge instructions maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. The great year.
With all of the ages, the astrological
We entered into the age of Aquarius in
we were to
2012.
place ourselves right at this position right here where it says 0 years BP. BP means before present. And it also is 25,920 years. So
What is the Son of Man, and why are the biblical Gospels of Luke, Mark, John, and Matthew so terrified of its return? The Son of Man is the current astrological age of Aquarius, the water bearer. The Son of Man has often been termed the water of life. The Son of Man in man demands his own. His cry is, "Cease torturing me, cease wasting." Atonement, the action of making amends for a wrong or injury. Planet Uranus, NASA CGI, magically affecting us from 3 billion kilometers away. The actual wandering star Uranus, filmed with a Nikon P900 home camera. 3 billion kilometers away with a home camera? Uranus's journey through Aries is affecting the opposite sign, Libra. The scale pans are wobbling and the balance point is quivering. The Earth's balance is being checked by the mighty cosmic power. Now we understand the real symbolism of this Masonic artwork. In its readjustment, some parts of the Earth will go down, while at the same time new islands will appear and continents will rise. The whole Earth will be purified, restored, and refreshed, and there shall be a new heaven and a new earth. This will be literally and physiologically true. Plato's description of Atlantis. The Ricat structure in Mauritania, Sahara. Probably just coincidence. The 1606 Mercator Arctic map shows an enormous island called Friesland, due west of Iceland, just south of Greenland's southwest indent. It had 6 major cities, 3 small towns, and its own coastal island chain, and a partridge and a pear tree. It was so important to the region that Mercator gave Friesland its own blow-up in the upper map corner. Van Dodecam put Friesland on his 1605 map. Same place, same shape, same name. Plancius put it on his 1605 map. D. Jode, 1593, Friesland. Google Earth 2019, underwater. Due west of Iceland, just south of Greenland's southwest indent. Friesland. This is the truth, whether we think of Abel's lamb or of patriarchal sacrifices or of that great sacrifice of which they all testified. They all with one voice tell us that atonement made is the only foundation of blessing. As we discussed in part 1, cartographers before the early 1700s all insisted that California was a giant island spanning the length of western US and halfway up Canada. Solarius certainly knew. The highly detailed 1702 Scherer map also corroborates. Unmistakably an island. And now, not so much. In fact, when we look at Africa, we see the exact same thing as the southwest US. This time, an elongated blemish with a bulging southeast side, also with major geological desert and destruction to its southwest. But before 1660, it was Lake Zembre on every map. Lake Zembre is always right there, due west of the northern tip of Madagascar, just southwest of Lake Victoria. Need more proof? Look at these. All that's left of it today is a huge dry scar on the African continent. Whatever happened in 1660 and 1812 in the age of Pisces that changed entire continents and drained at least 2 enormous lakes wasn't even worth warning about in biblical scriptures. In Luke 22:10, Jesus told his disciples how to know when he was coming back. Behold, when ye are entered into the city, there shall a man meet you, bearing a pitcher of water, Aquarius. Follow him into the zodiac house where he entereth in. In the book of Revelations, we find yet another mythology of a vengeful sky god coming to destroy the wicked before a new golden age can begin. This sky god has eyes of fire, the voice of many waters, and a sword coming out of his mouth. He's the beginning and the end, or really the end and the beginning, with an army of angels trumpeting terrifying noises from the sky as they come down to kill the wicked. Aquarius is associated by Kabbalists with the 14th letter N, or Nun. This letter literally means Jesus, or fish. In the biblical story, Joshua was the son of Nun, and Joshua is the origin of the Latinized form Jesus. Therefore, Jesus also means fish. It is common knowledge that the fish has been the esoteric symbol for 2,000 years for the Son of Man. But if Aquarius brings in a mighty golden age, why are Matthew, Mark, John, and Luke so terrified of the return of the Son of Man, Aquarius? Cleaning the house involves taking out all of the trash. Bible quotes sound better in the Queen's English. I'll try my best.
No one knows about the day or the hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour. You also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. It was the same in the days of Lot. People were eating, drinking, buying, selling, planting and building. But the day Lot left Sodom, fire and sulfur rained down from heaven and destroyed them all. It will be just like this on the day the Son of Man is revealed. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating, drinking, marrying up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man.
Archaeologists uncovered thousands of Stone Age underground tunnels stretching across Europe from Scotland to Turkey, perplexing researchers as to their original purpose. Really? We have modern governments spending trillions of tax dollars on underground cities and complexes worldwide. Built into solid bedrock or deep inside of mountains. We have ancient cultures worldwide not only obsessed with fire gods in the skies, but also the laborious digging out of underground cities and tunnels, while building their most important surface structures high up on solid bedrock. Did they all just get their kicks from creating nearly impossible, highly impractical construction projects? Or were they well aware of liquefaction, mud floods, water floods, earthquakes, and plasma discharge events that made it absolutely necessary to invest all of that time and hardship to protect themselves when the sky gods came to collect? We are right now entering the grand solar minimum, meaning very little sunspot activity. The sun's 4 magnetic fields are going out of phase. Only 2 of its magnetic fields went out of phase the last time, in the Dalton minimum in the year 1812, the exact year Napoleon's comet appeared. The New Madrid quakes wiped out 5 states. Lake Cannabis disappeared from maps, and California is no longer an island on maps. The Maunder minimum lasted 50 years. Starting at 1660, the exact same time period, the island of Friesland disappeared from maps. Lake Zembre, Zaire disappears from the African maps, and the Great Lakes appear on the United States maps. What do we say about coincidence? The universe is rarely so lazy. Sherlock Holmes. In Part 6, The Son of Man, how does it happen and when do we meet him?